Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Strosnider of Joe's Computer Museum. I am an Apple II lover from Central Ohio, and I've been playing with Apple IIs since basically I was 5 years old and in kindergarten. So Apple IIs have been my thing for all of the times. Apple IIs were my first exposure to computers. The Apple II, unfortunately, was not my first computer. It was my second computer. My first computer was a TRS-80. I know, boo. But it didn't last long, so the Apple II came along later, so it was cool. And so what I do is I play with these old computers, and I fix these old computers, and I do reviews and previews of stuff for these old computers, and I share that with the world because it's fun. I would like to apologize for not being at KansasFest in person this year. That happens sometimes. There were circumstances where I couldn't be there this year, but that is okay. I will apologize in advance. I am monitoring the Discords and the Zooms and the YouTube chats all at the same time. So if I miss a question or something that you throw at me or some comment or something, I apologize in advance. I can't look at all of the things at all the time. So this is my silly little panel for tonight. This is basically a little special piece for us, mostly in the remote, but some of you that are local and present and in person as well, to just hang out and talk about fun Apple II stuff. I don't have any major plan. I don't have an agenda. I don't have any sort of, today we're going to talk about XYZ streaming to ABC 123 or anything like that. This is banter from the bench. So let's get into what that is. So in my little world here, I do all different types of things. As I already said, I play with Apple IIs, but I also mod them sometimes. If you attended KFest 2020 or go back to KFest 2020 archives, you'll see the NeoPixel mod thing that I did, where I took the Mac Effects clear case and put RGB lights in it that you could control from the Apple II. Super cool. But also I do repairs of logic boards. Like, for example, I've got this here. It's not an Apple II, but it gives you an idea. I got a logic board here that's in for repair, and I've been working on this for somebody. And all different types of stuff like that. I do reverse engineering projects. I have reverse engineered and created replacements, for example, for the Apple IIe and Apple II Plus keyboards. So if you got one of those keyboards and the encoder is dead, you don't have to go on the internet and hunt for a replacement encoder that's just a pull from somebody else's Apple II. You can get a replacement and not destroy another Apple II. So lots of cool stuff like that. Eric says, asking which Discord. Eric, if you are a KansasFest attendee, it's in the KansasFest Discord thing. If you're not a KansasFest attendee, you're just watching with us here on YouTube, and you miss the Discord stuff. I'm sorry. That's how KansasFest works. But that is okay. So we have lots of cool stuff that we can talk about tonight. Do people have questions and thoughts and comments about how to fix stuff? I don't know. Maybe we could talk about that. We can do that. I can talk about some of the tools that I use to work on and re-diagnose Apple IIs and my process of how I got there. If you want to talk about that, we can do that. I can show off the two Mac Classic IIs that I rescued today. We could do that. That's fine. It doesn't matter. But we're all just friends, and we're hanging out in the virtual conference room in Kokorin Hall. Basically, is the way I see it. So let's see here. The first thing I really do want to dig into, and this is something that I forgot to mention during my vendor announcement, but I'll go ahead and announce it now. So Bob Darlington, if any of you follow his exploits on the Apple II enthusiast group, you may on Facebook and some other groups he may be in, you may have seen some of the stuff that he's been showing off about an audio card, a stereo audio card for the Apple II GS called Light Sound. Well, I have one right here, final unit. final unit. And the reason I wanted to talk about this at the vendor fair is because I'm going to be the guy selling these. So when these go up for sale, you'll be able to grab them from me. I'm going to keep the price as low as I possibly can because the sales that I do on my website it's not my primary job. I'm not doing that to generate income. I do that so that I can like get things out there in the world to help keep these old computers running. So that's going to be up soon. And I can actually demo this here in a little bit. But a little bit more about me and the Apple II. So I really got back into the Apple II stuff and the old computer stuff. Oh gosh, when was that? Oh, about 2016, 2015 or so. I had this huge pile of old computers back here, which keeps growing for some reason, like they multiply like bacteria or something. I don't know, but I had this huge collection of computers down here, and I was starting to get bored. And I was also going through some mental health issues that basically was anxiety and stuff. And I eventually got some help for that. And hopefully you can see I'm all better now. Well, mostly. I mean, it's an ongoing, of course, it's mental health is always an ongoing thing as we know. But I've got that problem fixed. And like, I want to get out there in the world and do something. And I turn around and I look behind me. I'm like, well, I got these Apple IIs and I got these Macs and I got these IBMs and I like the Apple III back here that's in pieces. And why don't I start a YouTube channel and show that stuff off? Because I've been watching YouTube for a long time, watching people play video games and do all types of stuff. So I'm like, let's share that. So I start to get into that. In my very first YouTube video that was in true relation to the museum here was a review of the floppy EMU. And that thing went gangbusters. And then I'm like, okay, well, this is what I'm doing now. This is now my hobby. So I really got back into the Apple II as my primary core of my channel and Apple II related stuff. But that's just kind of led down the road farther and farther and farther to where it's not just playing with the Apple II and booting up software and reliving my youth. It's what can we really do with the Apple II? And then, well, my Apple II is broken. How do I learn how to fix that? Oh, I know how to fix that now. Now I want to build my own 8-bit computer, which I did. I have a series on that. And now I know how to build my own 8-bit computer. I can fix other things. I can fix other old 8-bit computers. Like I fixed this old thing back here and my Mac's up there. And now people send me boards to fix. And now it's accelerated to the point where, oh, well, now I've got stuff and knowledge that I can use to make replacement parts for things. And that started when a wonderful person in the community, Britt Dodd, a lot of you know Britt. I met him for the first time at KansasFest 2019. He traded me a couple of Apple IIIs for a couple of Macs that were just down here taking up space. And I'm like, well, I'll play with the Apple III. The Macs are just sitting here. He trades me the Apple III, but it's got a bad keyboard encoder. And I'm like, that's not going to fly. I have the knowledge now. Let's make a new keyboard encoder. So I did that, launched my website, and now I've got all this wacky knowledge just like parked up here of all this weird stuff of how to do microcontrollers and how to program in C code in the microchip IDE program, and how to use an oscilloscope to look at signals on a Mac SE board. And it just keeps going and going and going and going more and more. So that's kind of gotten to me to where I am now, to where I can just sit here and yell at you remotely over the internet and say, you can fix it too. So let's do that. Paul Hackstrom dropped a note in the chat. He has a keyboard, a Bell & Howell Apple II Plus keyboard that works quite poorly. I banged on the keys for a while, but I'm getting both crosstalk. Hitting one key produces a different character, and silence, hitting one key produces no character at all. I still hold on to host spring dioxide, and banging on the keys will help, but if not, where does one start and where does one escalate from there? That is a really good question. So the trick to that would be, I would start, if possible, because the Bell & Howell 2 Plus keyboard, if memory serves, is the more later standard keyboard that has the same keyboard controller chip, the AY5 3600 Pro, that the regular Apple II Plus does. If you got another Apple II Plus, I would start by just swapping that chip. It's in a socket on the little header board that's underneath the keyboard. Swap that chip over, see what happens. If that fixes the problem, then you just know it's the encoder chip and you can get a new encoder chip. jcm-1.com, buy encoder chips today. Ha, no, I'm kidding. But that's a good start. Crosstalk, hitting one key, producing a different character, usually is indicative of that. However, it could be the actual backplane. Now, the cool thing about the Apple II Plus keyboard is it uses individual key switches. So if you're pressing A and you're getting Q or something else like that, you're not really worried about one of these foil and film or membrane keyboards or anything like that. Anything wacky like that. You're not worried about that. They're usually physical key switches. However, that would be another thing to check, is to take the keyboard out, flip it over, look at the back, look at the traces, take the keycaps out and try to look between the keycaps, make sure there's no crud in the keyboard, obviously. That might be causing your problem there. Still interested. His keyboard is a raised Powerlight Datanetics one, yes, which uses the MM5740 AAE keyboard encoder. Again, another encoder that I have available. Heck, Paul, if you wanted to borrow one, I'll let you borrow an encoder from me just to see if it fixes it. Yeah, I would be checking the PCB first after the encoder chip. The Datanetics style keyboard has extra chips on it that do wacky, weird things. If you look at the schematic, it's because like the Apple II is expecting negative logic, whereas the encoders use positive logic, and it's a weird, like Apple's like, we want this, and keyboard company is like, well, we design it this way, and they're like, well, you're gonna have to change it to whatever. But yeah, that would be my suggestion. If you don't see anything visibly in between keys, that is an issue. You know, worst case scenario, you might have to start removing keys. Another thing that you could do to eliminate the actual key switches as a potential problem is if you flip the keyboard over, you've got contacts on the back. You can just take literally like a pair of tweezers like this that are metal and tap the contacts together, or a piece of metal or something, just the two contacts where that key are, to see if it trips the key correctly. Those are things that you can do there. The Datanetics keyboard, and to some extent the older Apple II Plus keyboard as well, they have that extra logic on it, and there's a possibility that one of those logic chips is gone wacky, and so what it's doing is it's not translating the the signals correctly from what the encoder puts out to what the Apple II is expecting. So it could be one of those chips as well. It's not like it's the Apple IIe where the only thing doing anything is the encoder chip. So that's a thing. He says he's nodding vigorously and appreciative to my camera, which is off, but know that I am. Yeah, good to know. So yeah, I have how can we put it? I don't want to, encyclopedic is way too big of a term to state, but I have a greater than pedestrian knowledge of the way the keyboard system works on the Apple II and Apple III. So yeah, I can answer questions like that. So that's fine. Yes. But to get a little bit more into keyboards, I mean, yeah, I got into the keyboard thing again because I got this Apple III and it had a bad keyboard encoder. And it's not like the Apple IIe, where the Apple IIe uses, and even the Apple II Plus with the later keyboard to some extent, they use the generic AY5 3600 Pro. Pro meaning PROM, meaning programmable read-only memory. I'll get into that in a second. They use the generic version of that keyboard chip from General Instrument. The Apple II, or the Apple III and the Apple III Plus don't. They use the same chip. However, this chip was factory flashed, to use newer terms. It was mask ROM programmed, but was factory flashed with a different keyboard matrix, so that when certain X and Y intercepts are hit, it outputs a specific character code. In the Apple II, this is handled by using the generic chip, and then there's a second ROM chip, and if you look inside the Apple II, it's like right next to the keyboard encoder, that actually takes the outputs of the keyboard encoder and converts it into Apple's internal high byte or high bit ASCII that it uses for internal storage, or however it works. So the Apple II, through this ROM, is converting the generic chip into something it can use. The Apple III doesn't do that. So the Apple III outputs ASCII directly. So you can't just put a standard AY5 3600 Pro into the Apple III. Oh no, you have to have Apple's special version of this chip. So the only way you're going to get that is you happen to just luck upon somebody on eBay who had a box of them from a repair center, and they're Apple IIIs. That's not going to happen. You're not going to find those. Or if you steal one from another working Apple III, there are so few working Apple IIIs in the world that I thought it was an absolute travesty to just steal a encoder from one Apple III to make another work, or, to have the Apple III you got just be useless, to be a paperweight. And oh gosh, is it a paperweight? That's not a paperweight. It's like a house weight. It's a car weight. It'll hold your car down in a hurricane. Anyway, to just have, your Apple III dead, you can't use it. You're going to steal the keyboard chip out of one working one to another. No. So that's what led me down that entire route of designing those keyboard chips. But of course, because it's effectively the same chip as the Apple II, but with a different key map. That's all that was different, is the bits that it puts out the data, the data pins, depending on the key matrix intersection. I'm like, I can use the exact same logic and make an Apple II encoder, or an Apple II Plus encoder as well, or an Apple IIe encoder. So that's why my encoder, it supports the 3, the 3 Plus, the 2 Plus, the 2E, the 2C, and the 2C Plus. It supports all of them. All you do is move a jumper and it changes the key map. It's magic. Magic. Ah. Yeah, and Paul's too. The 3 and the 3 Plus each have distinct encoders. Exactly. Because the 3 Plus, they changed a couple of the intersections, and it added, they also completely changed the way the matrix for the numpad was encoded. Why? I don't know. Some sort of, oh, this thing has too much radio frequency interference, but if we change the intersection, it goes down, blah, blah, blah. FCC Part 15, Part J rules, blah, blah. And so those are two different as well. But again, my encoder, you just move the jumper and it makes it a 3 Plus. So that's fine. Speaking of that, Petr Puskaric is in the chat here. I want to thank him very much, because he allowed me to confirm that the Apple III encoding worked correctly. He was able to take the keyboard encoder and put it on another Apple III and confirm that. But he also had an Apple III Plus with the different keyboard in it, with the different keyboard matrix intersections. So he allowed me to properly test the Apple III Plus encoding, because I don't have a 3 Plus. So lots of thanks to him. The thanks to him are actually burned into the ROM code, if you know where to look. So yeah. So yeah, awesome stuff. But of course, then that changed to the, that then went on to doing the encoder for the Datanetic style keyboard, which is much rarer. It was only in the first, 10 or 15,000 Apple IIs or something like that. The raised power light keyboard, as it were. Also, that same encoder was used in a lot of people used a version of that keyboard on their Apple I's with that same encoder on it, the MM5740AAE encoder from from National Semiconductor, whoever it was, I don't remember. But you know, I wanted to do a reverse engineering of that as well. But finding one of those keyboards, like how? Like there's so few people in the world that have one, and nobody wants to ship me one. They're like, I'm not sending you my insanely expensive $500 if you find it somewhere keyboard that only. But luckily, somebody had one that was dead. Their keyboard encoder or their encoder failed on their keyboard, along with another chip on the keyboard, but that's immaterial here. And they reached out to me and they're like, Joe, can you fix my keyboard? I'm like, what kind is it? And they're like, it's a Datanetics keyboard. I'm like, yeah. So that gave me the opportunity to fix a keyboard that was already dead. They shipped the keyboard to me. I was able to use the data sheet and almost line for line the code from the other encoder on this encoder, which is changing the pinouts in a different little PCB. And now that works too. I'm not the only person who's done that. There's a gentleman or lady, someone in Belgium on Tindy who sells their own version of that same encoder, but they only sell to Belgium. They don't ship even outside of their own country. So I ship internationally, so that's the thing. Again, I'm not trying to use this as a sales thing. I'm just trying to say, hey, I'm here to fix stuff and make it work for you. That's what I do. That's what I enjoy doing. And to have the opportunity to share that with people is super awesome. Peter Priskarik is asking, will that work on the Franklin Ace 1000 series? I don't know. I do not have a Franklin Ace to open up the keyboard or look at the system to know that. I'm sure I could look it up in the schematics. And if somebody wants to kind of shuffle off in the background and do that, so you don't get to watch me like surf the internet while I'm on a session tonight, and look that up, that would be cool, and let me know. If the Franklin Ace 1000 series uses the 5740 or uses the AY5 3600 Pro style keyboards, a keyboard encoder, then my encoder would probably work maybe with an adjustment to the key map. I don't know. It has the foil pad, so I wasn't sure how close to the Datanetics was. I don't know. For all I know, the same company made the keyboard because Apple farmed the keyboards out to somebody else. They didn't make them themselves. They farmed them out to Alps. They farmed them out to Datanetics. They farmed them out to the keyboard company. A lot of these other folks. So I don't know. Folks are yelling at me in the Discord. Stand by. I just want to make sure I'm not missing people's statements and stuff. Aha! Cool. There is a question. So there are lots of questions here. So let's open some questions. We have questions. Are the replacement Apple II Plus keyboards themselves available anywhere? That I don't know. The only keyboards that I know of that are anything like the Apple II are the Apple IIe reproduction keyboards that Mac Effects made. So I am not sure exactly. Eric wants us to show the tools. We'll show the tools in a little bit. Petter would like to hear about the cloning process and what you've learned was the best and worst of the process. Yes, let's talk about that. Reactive Micro is selling Apple II keyboards. Thanks, John. Thanks for answering that. There's your question, Eric. Petter would ask, interested in hearing about the cloning process, what I learned was the best and worst of the process. Oh gosh, so this is a nice deep one. So I'm actually planning on doing a video, less of a deep dive video and more of an overview video on my YouTube channel at some point. So if you want to like wait for that, that'll come out eventually. But we can deep dive into some of the details here. So of course, you already know how it started. I had an Apple II or an Apple III. I have a chip that doesn't work. I need to reverse engineer this chip. So let's talk about reverse engineering this chip. The way I thought about reverse engineering this chip is thus. I need to learn how the chip works, right? And this was my first reversing of anything. This isn't cloning. Cloning is different. Cloning is a lot easier than actual reverse engineering. Yeah, John Mounts put the link to the keyboard replacement in both the Discord and the chat. So that's there if you want to take a look at that. Reverse engineering is a little bit different because what you're trying to do isn't you're not just making a copy of something like a photocopy, which is what cloning is, to be honest. You're doing a simulation / emulation of an original chip. So reverse engineering people is also hard. Thanks, Eric. So you got to keep in mind things like timings and order of operation and things like that. Actual logical function. You have to understand how it functions because you have to recreate the function from a description, right? That's the thing. That's the trick. So I'm not an electrical engineer. I am self-taught in everything. I have no college degree. I graduated high school with a C- average, and that was mostly held up by my Latin class and my programming classes. That was it. So I had to teach myself how to do that. And so the way I thought about that was, well, first off, let's look at the data sheet because I watch, what's his name? Not a lot anymore, but I used to watch Dave Jones' EEV blog. I also watch Big Clive on YouTube. And they're always showing these data sheets, and the data sheets have good descriptions of how things function. So I'm like, okay, well, let's go get the data sheet for this chip. And the data sheet for the AY5 3600 chip is insanely well written. Most modern data sheets nowadays don't give you this finite, delicious detail like that data sheet did. They tell you, well, it's an inverter. It goes in, it comes out, it's blah, and sometimes it'll give you some timing stuff, some overall generic timing, but that's it. This thing shows you down to the clock cycle because it can run at many speeds. It tells you this happens, then X number of clock cycles later, this happens, then X number of clock cycles later, that happens. And it doesn't only show you that in diagrams, it writes it out. So that data sheet, generally speaking, is the great start, is to look at that, look at the data sheet of what you're trying to reverse engineer. If it's something like that, if it's something that has a data sheet, and wrap your head around how it works. You don't have to memorize exact timings and all that stuff. You're trying to understand from a 10,000 foot view, what does this thing do? How does it do the thing, right? Sorry, Ron and Javier just posted in them watching the TV there at Kokorin Hall with me in the background. We're on a little podcast called Retro Repair Roundup, so 3/4 of us are there. They're asking where the cowboy hats are, and cowboy hat represents. Woo woo. Also, for anybody who doesn't know about it, but you do now, I have my very own Javier candle, Saint Javier. May he bless our reefas and replace our capacitors. So anyway, back to where I was. So understanding the general concept of how this thing you're reverse engineering works is the primary step. And that was honestly one of the most difficult things for me because I have self-diagnosed ADHD. I can't pay attention to anything. Details are not me. I am not a detail guy. I'm a concept person. So it took me a long time to convert the details of this data sheet into a concept instead. So once I got that figured out, then it was okay, so now we just need to recreate this function. Luckily, again, the data sheet was excellent in giving us the data we needed to reverse engineer that thing. From then, it was okay, so what's the next step? Do I get a chip? Do I take a chip? What chip do I use to do this? I already had some experience making a keyboard encoder for my JCM1 single board computer, so I decided to go with that. And as a matter of fact, the code is almost identical because the function is almost identical to that other thing. And it's like, okay, so what chip do I need? How many, look at the data sheet, how many pins do I need? How many are output pins? How many are input pins? How many are bimodal pins or tri-state pins, things like that. And then from there, it's just a lot of programming. The programming was difficult too, but I luckily, Quinn Dunkey, I don't know if she's at KFest this year. I don't know if she's remote this year. Quinn, thank you very much. You did some sort of project in the past with some sort of keyboard encoder. I think it was for the Veronica thing. And I used some of ideas from the Veronica project that she had to learn how to actually read a keyboard and do just a lot of the code stuff. And a lot of that is then emulating from the code, the timing and the order of operation that the data sheet says. So when you press a key, what does the data sheet say has to happen? Well, this happens, then that happens, then that happens. And then it's lots of iterations of code over and over and over and over again. Once I got to a point where I thought the code would probably work, let me see if I have it. Do I have my original? Stand by. I'm looking for my original prototype. Aha. Is that it? Yep. And so I wired up a little prototype board. These pins go into the Apple II. These pins select my chip, and I could put the chip in the prototype, put it in the computer, bang on the keyboard, see what happens. Is it repeating keys correctly? Is it picking up the right key sequences? Oh, when I hold shift and type 7, I get an exclamation point instead of the ampersand and stuff like that. I could go back to my code, look at what was wrong, tweak it, do those things, and keep iterating that until it was right. That project also helped me learn designing PCBs, because I mean, people don't want me like shipping this stack of stuff to them every single time I ship them one, right? I mean, this is a prototype for the MM series. It needed to have a special header on it to clear the keyboard. It's just like mess of wires, huge mess of wires. But you have to learn how to design PCBs or printed circuit boards. And a lot of folks helped me with that specifically. You've got a lot of stuff I followed from Big Clive online, and his sprint layout that he used helped me teach me a lot. Brankus Creations, if you guys don't know him, he's in Australia. He fixes Macs all the time. The guy is an absolute like legend, to use the term they like to use in Australia. The guy is a legend. And a lot of his work inspired me too. And then that's just learning how to use a PCB layout tool. That again was most self-taught, is like, well, which tool do I want? KiCad or Sprint Layout? I went and grabbed one, played around with it for a week and figured it out. And that's again self-learning, learning the terminology in playing with a PCB. It's like, well, what's a trace? What's a via? What's a through hole? Those kinds of things. What's the silk screen? Learning how to then export that out of the application as what are called Gerber files. And also don't forget the drill file, or you'll get a board without any holes in it and you can't stick things in it. Learning how to export that stuff out and then get it to a manufacturer in a format that they can read and then get boards back and all of that stuff. So lots of details there. More Q&A questions. Let's see. How did I learn electronics and how long did it take? That is a really good question too. So I started playing with electronics before I started playing with computers to some extent. I didn't have a computer until I was like 13. And even then, it was like a cast-off old TRS-80. Where did the Q&A window go? There it is. Before that, I was into electronics kits and stuff like that. I had one of those 60-in-1 electronics kits where you had the springs with the wires and you could make stuff up. I learned, some basic electronics, but I didn't really get super serious into it because I lacked the intelligence to really get into it, the training, the anything to dig into that. I had the basics, but then that went off to the side. Got into computers, but then I came back around to electronics, mostly when I decided I wanted to make my own single board computer. I wanted to make my own version of I don't know how you want to put it. If I was a kid in 1987, what awesome 8-bit computer would I make? If I had my druthers and I could do it, well, I taught myself how to do it. Literally, I just taught myself how to do it. I don't know how else to explain it. It's not like I took a course or anything like that. It's like, okay, so how do you interface a CPU? Well, what CPU do I want to use? Well, the 6502, of course, because I knew how to program the 6502 because I had a lot of experience with my Apple IIs and doing assembly language on those from, the late 90s. So I'm like, well, let's start with the 6502 and figure out how that wired up and then just added onto it. Lots of folks over at the 6502.org forums, lots of great advice over there of how to build that. And then I just learned from there, from reading and watching YouTube videos, honestly. Well, what's a pull-up resistor? What's a pull-down resistor? Why do you not let signals float, as they call it? What is current limiting and how do you prevent your computer from exploding? And where would you use a diode and why? Why is a decoupling capacitor important for preventing glitches and all these types of things? And I just taught myself how to do that. I don't know how else to explain it. And how long did it take? I started in maybe 2018. And now it's 2022 and I'm designing full boards of stuff. I'm cloning things. I know how to put logic chips together to get certain results. So, 5-6 years of just, and not dedicated work. This isn't like 5 and 6 years of like whatever. It's like 5 and 6 years of afternoon, nights and weekends after work, goofing off to have fun. So, yeah. Answered that one. And Chizzy, a suggestion of to trans warp. I will get back to that petter. Rodney Ross asked a question in relation to the previous thing. What did I land at? KiCad, Eagle, Other. So I have two PCB design tools I use. My primary go-to tool is Sprint Layout. Because like this, the name of the program says Sprint, it's fast. It is fast, it's easy, it gets out of the way, it doesn't crash, it doesn't have problems, it doesn't have like 47 gigabytes of junk in some folder. There's a whole bunch of libraries for like 25 different tools that are all packaged together in this weird thing, the way Linux open source stuff works. Sprint Layout is not perfect. It can't do like 6, 8, 15 layer, these crazy layer boards. It's good for like 2 and 4 layer boards itself, but for the kinds of stuff that I do, for the simple type of projects I do, it is fast, it's easy. I can get in, design something, export it, get out, get it shot over to the PCB manufacturer and get on with life. It's like a $69 program. It is not that expensive. The tool I started with was KiCad, to the point that like it's 2 versions newer now and I haven't updated it yet. And like apparently it's so different, I would have to relearn it if I were to update it. I don't know. If I do need to design a schematic for something, an actual old school like paper schematic, like one of these things. Do I have it up here where I can show it? Yeah, like if I were to design a schematic like that, I will still use KiCad for that, and I'll just lay out the schematic manually in KiCad because its schematic designer works really well. No complaints. I don't have any experience with Eagle or with Easy EDA or any of those other tools. I just haven't used them. So, other questions and things. Patrick King asks, Why would many Apple IIc memory chips get hot on repaired boards? The memory chip was replaced. And another 2C memory board with MMU chip removed. That is a very good question. So like, if your memory chips are getting hot in an Apple II, that is almost always an indication that that memory chip is bad. That's just how it is. They short internally, especially if they're MT or MOSTEC brand chips. Those are notoriously awful chips. As Adam McG, on a lot of the different medias, or Hulkintosh, as you might know on the Twitters, will say, if it's MT and you see MT chips in your Apple II, literally replace all of them. Take all the MT chips out and put Kyocera's or Samsung's or TI's or literally any other thing other than MT chips in there, because they're going to fail. And they do. This is universal. MT chips are crud and need to be launched out of a cannon into the sun. If you have a hot chip and you replace the chip and it gets hot again, something else is going on there. What that might be, I don't know. You put the chip in backwards, that'll fry the chip and cause it to short internally and go super hot. I don't know. Why would it? Just lots of different things can cause memory chip failure. But primarily, it's just the chip's bad. If the chip is hot, if a memory chip is blazing hot, you touch your finger on it, it's like, ow, the chip's just bad. That's just how it is. You put another bad chip in it, you're swapping chips around, but it's staying hot because the chip's bad. Yeah, so that's what that is. Rob Hillman says, first time I hooked up 6502 on a breadboard, I hooked it up backwards and gave it 12 volts. Nice and toasty. Yep. Absolutely. So that's my suggestion there. If you need to get those chips, the most common chips used in the later Apple IIs are the 65, or not the 65, the 4164 chips, or the 4464 chips. You can get most of those chips at Jameco, Jameco. They still find sources for those somehow. So that's what that is. Ron, Joe's hot chip, one chip challenge. Yes. No, not doing that. Ron, no, thank you. Petters, any chance you may have any suggestions on testing a transwarp for an Apple IIe that appears to have major issues accessing any memory outside its own board? Board acts the same with 1.3 and 1.4. Firmware has to be some decoder or selector chip on the transwarp board, right? Sure, absolutely. And the upside with the transwarps on those is, I believe, all the chips are socketed. Just replace the chips until it starts working. That's my suggestion. Another question for you, Petter, would be, is it doing the same thing in multiple different Apple IIs? So if it's only having a problem with a single Apple II, then that's going to indicate, of course, that the Apple II is the problem. Petter, of course, if you guys don't know, Petter is well known in the industry. He's done a lot of super awesome magic stuff in the background with lots of different things. And if he wants to throw in the chat the kinds of things that he's done in the background, he's no slouch. He knows what he's doing. So yeah, but that's going to be, I can do that. Yep, same issues in a 2 Plus and a 2E and a 2E Platinum. Yeah, that's a logic chip. You've got a bad logic chip somewhere. If you have one of these, if you got a logic chip tester, I got this little cheapy thing I found somewhere. You can also get logic chip testers based on an Arduino. You can also get logic chip testers. Wait, hold on. I'll show you. In this box here, because I haven't finished building it yet, you get these like the back bit or the better bit logic chip testers. Those things are super helpful for actually confirming a chip is bad. So you can just yank the chip out, throw it in the tester, set it to it, hit run. It'll test all the logic gates and stuff, and give you a definitive answer if it's bad outside of circuit. So it's super helpful there. Yeah. Chris Torrance just actually dropped in the Discord a quick link-a-doodle there to to Jameco to find Samsung 4164 chips for most Apple IIs. Super helpful there. The 120 speed might not necessarily be correct. 120 is fine. Chris, thanks for dropping that. 150, I think, is the slowest speed you can go for in the Apple II, but you don't want to go too fast either, because if you go too fast, the chip can present data on the bus before it's supposed to, and can actually cause bus contention. It's rare, but it has happened. I have seen it. I've had a situation where somehow I had 80 nanosecond RAM, and I put it in the machine, and it was weird, but the RAM chips tested fine in my RAM chip tester. And so I swapped it out with some slower, like 120s, and it was fine. Yeah. So you don't want to go too fast, but like that 150 to 100 range is going to be fine for your Apple IIs. I use that exact 120 right there that he linked to in all of my projects. I have a whole bin of it over here. I got parts. So yeah. So that works fine. But anyway, back to Banter. Yeah. Chips. Yeah, just start swapping chips. Just swapping chips and see what happens. Insert live, click that button. Jeff D has a great question. I'll get to that next. Neil's question came first. You mentioned the new audio card. Will it fit behind an Apple squeezer? I don't know, but I have my Apple II GS out here. We can see. I don't have an Apple squeezer though, but I can show you how small this card is. It's basically the size of the socket, and it has plenty of room here. In addition, this card can go anywhere. It can go in any slot because it is only using the slot for power. All of the magic comes off of this header. So we'll show you. As a matter of fact, let me click a doodle button. That is nearly aimed correctly. You guys can't see this because I haven't switched my camera yet. We're doing it live. Any of you who know me from my YouTube live streams and stuff, you'd be used to this, me moving cameras around all the time. So let's do this thing. Let's go to here. Did you all see that switch? Did that switch correctly to the second camera? Let's find out. I'm watching it on YouTube. It did. Good. Cool. So light sound. Here it is, right? And so here's, the slot, and it's the thickness of the slot. It's no, like, can you even see that? There. It's literally the same size as the slot. So it'll fit just about anywhere. The clearance above the socket is like, I don't know, about half a centimeter, or, a quarter of an inch, whatever terminology you want to use. So yeah, and it'll go in any socket, literally any slot. It doesn't matter because it's not using the slot for anything. It's just using that for power. So if you've got, like, say you got slot 6 open because you're using the regular port on the back for your floppy drives, put in slot 6, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't care. It'll work just fine. So yeah. So installation is pretty easy. Pick socket, stick it in there. They will come with a speaker header. These are stereo, of course, and we're also have some test pieces here. They're going to come with headers too that go in the sockets in the back, so you can even plug it in the back there. And then this little header right here that comes off the board. There's a stereo speaker header right here near the sound chip, which was, believe it or not, designed for that. So that just goes in right there. That's it. It's installed. It's done. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. And then you plug your speaker in. Then we can even do a live sound demo. Let me see if I can get this arranged correctly. You should be able to see my screen there. Apologies for the shaky cam. It is a effect of having to do things the way that I do them. So if we turn this on, speakers up, yes. It's got a sync. Aha, Apple IIgs. Now, my video here, I'm using one of those Gonbez things. Yeah, ignore the yellow, that's just my cable. I'm using one of these Gonbez things. I have a, power came out. I have a little Raspberry Pi Pico hooked up to it, running GBS control, which allowed me to set the phasing on this perfectly. So it's like a perfect screen. But anyway, so as you might be able to hear, like, let's go here and go to sound and go to sounds, and we could, do different beeps. Quack, 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 quack. That's coming out of the speakers up here. It's coming out of the speakers up there. So, yep, works great. Sounds much, much better than the built-in speaker. And it's in stereo, so if you have any video games that use stereo, it works. Now, my Apple IIgs has just hung up, so like I would have to restart it, and that's because of the drive image on my microdrive turbo I'm using is broken, and I need to reformat it, but that's another thing, and it's boring, so we're not going to demo doing that. So let's change my screen real quick, doodle. Back to Facecam. And he's back. Yes. Yes. I use Wagos. Yes, this is the the power supply in this is the Apple IIgs power supply from Reactive Micro. Hammy Uri is great. Buy his stuff. Help support another Apple II guy. It's great. Use the XG EUC T56 for logic chip testing. Yes, I have one of those. I don't know where I put it. It's up here. Like I got a billion. Like I got one of those, and I've got an old Mini Pro, and I got this thing, this Wellen VP299, specifically because it programs old PAL chips, because I'm going to need that for a super secret Macintosh product. I'm not supposed to be telling you about that. Shh. Hush. So yeah. Lots of questions. Where is the Q&A? I'll make sure I'm not missing anything. Yes, show the tools. Yes, let's talk about tools. So fixing old computers. Fixing old computers is a different thing. Before I get into that, I am seeing a couple questions in the Discord that will be quick answers. I'm going to answer that real quick. Jeff D asks, given the state of parts, anyone know any compatibilities with 74LS in place of 74LS parts? If it were me, Jeff, I would use 74 HCT parts. Those are HC style parts. So they're CMOS, but the T, they have special drivers in them to make them compatible with the 5-volt TTL logic. I have found that their function tends to be more in line with the function of the original LS parts. ALSs tend to be, if memory serves, faster. And just like with RAM, that can be problematic. If you're just using it for like some general jelly bean logic project, it doesn't matter, right? If you're using it in anything that's timing critical, for example, I'll use this as an example. I have a back there behind that pile right there, right in, it's underneath there. I have a Franklin Ace 2200 that came to me broken, super insanely broken. It works now. That thing has some really, really picky timing on it. And the ALS can do the same thing as the RAM. It can assert its data pins or its outputs or whatever faster than the rest of the logic is expecting. It can actually mess up the other logic, especially if the system has been designed for LS specifically with that timing in mind. So you can just kind of you could try throwing ALS at it, and if it works great. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But if it doesn't work, try HCT. HCT tends to be the most compatible. I've been having problems getting old LS logic. I've been doing HCT logic in my Soft Pro 3 cards, in lots of other stuff. And it just works. So can't really complain. Ron is asking a question, does that audio card have an amp? Nope, it is line only. How hard does it make one of those GONBEZ things? There is a barrier to entry that requires a little bit of soldering knowledge, not too crazy. If you soldered any sort of like through hole kit before, you can do it. I would just look up GBS control. I will type that. And look up that project. It'll tell you what you need to do. It'll tell you the Raspberry Pi, Arduino-y, whatever chip thingy you need. It gives you instructions on exactly how to wire it up to the GONBEZ and which GONBEZ GBS 8220 thing that you need. So yeah. The RGB HDMI is way more turnkey. Yes, it is. I think the GONBEZ does a great job on the video though, and I already had the board. So I'm like, I'm gonna hack it. Anyway. Thinking, lots of questions there. Let's go back to the actual Q&A here. Somebody dropped a question. Yes, show the tools. Patrick M. King asked a question, why would my CFF-A 3000 not show up on slot 2 on my 2GS computers? It's okay in slot 7. Because the Apple II GS has so much built-in hardware mapped to all those slot numbers. If you don't go into the slots desk accessory, which is control, open Apple control escape, or you go into control panels from GSOS and change that slot 2, to be your card, it won't activate the firmware of whatever card you have physically in that port. So you have to remember to switch that. Yeah, show the tools. Oh my gosh, I have tools out the yin yang. So fix repair tools for these old computers. It depends on how far you want or need to go with things. So the number one tool you're going to want, of course, is your brain, is common sense. Don't put things in backwards. Be slow and be careful, and get good, so to speak. But beyond that, you're going to want a solid multimeter of some description, because voltages, surprisingly or not, can be a big thing. If your power supply's voltages are slightly too low, the whole machine's going to be wacky. It can help you detect shorts on certain pins on RAM chips, for example. That's a big thing too. And having a multimeter doesn't have to be expensive. Like this is the Kaiweets KM601, not sponsored. That's the multimeter that I use. This is like a $40 multimeter. And it does all of the basics that you're going to need. It'll do continuity tests, voltage tests, capacitance tests, diode tests, all those things, so you can test the functionality of individual components. That's important. Watching a few YouTube videos to figure out how to use that tool, helpful as well. Fingers. Fingies. Fingies are a big special tool for working on these old computers. Because we talked about before with the RAM, one of the best ways to find bad chips is just stick your finger on it after you've touched something metal to discharge static from yourself, of course. Just touch the chips. A warm chip is fine. And by warm, I mean you can put your finger on it, it doesn't burn you. But if you put your finger on that and it's like, ow, that chip's bad. It's a bad chip. That chip's got to go. It's got to get out. You got to put in a chip in there. And then you look up that chip online, you go to a place like Jameco, or Mouser Electronics, or DigiKey, or Newark, or Element 14, or whoever you want to go to. Rapid Electronics, I don't care. Find a place. You get your replacement chip and put it in there. We can talk about replacing the chips here in a second. If you're getting to the point to where you need to actually get chips out to replace chips, it depends on the chip. Some chips are socketed. And if that's the case, you'll need something similar to this. This I found is the best tool to do it. because it works on every chip all the time. This is the Weha 26810 chip lifter. See if I can get close to get it to focus on that. Is it going to focus? See, my camera is dumb. It's going to take like 20 minutes to decide like that's what it needs to focus on. But basically, it's a flathead screwdriver that's been turned. You can also use a flathead screwdriver, but this allows you to get in at an angle. That allows you to get in and pry the chip up just a little bit, get on the other side, pry it up a little bit. And then what I do is I will get in under the chip and I will actually turn this. I will actually rotate it slightly, and that can help pry the chip out. You can get universal little chip lifter-y things like one of these things. You stick over the chip and you just go like this and it yanks it out. But this will only work for chips of certain sizes, and you need one for every kind of different size of chip you might need. Like this, for example, you can see the width of it only works on wide chips. So this is for like CPUs and ROMs and stuff. But a lot of the chips you have to replace aren't going to be CPU and ROMs. They're going to be the little logic chips. This thing can't pull logic chips very well. Perfect. Worst case scenario, get a flat blade screwdriver, stick it under there, and just go super slow. Additionally, hold your hand or your fingers over top of the chip as you pry it. The last thing we want to do is do this and get a stiction situation where it kind of desticks out of the socket and flies across the room. Or worst case scenario, flying across the room is fine. Bent pins or broken pins, bad mojo. Go super slow until you have a feel for it. Until you've done it 15,000 times and the chip just comes out. I mean, I can even demonstrate it. Can I demonstrate it? This will be kind of a hard demonstration, but basically you can just, you get underneath here and you just pry on it very slowly until you got one side slightly pried up, but not all the way. Because if you keep going, you're going to bend the pins on this end. Then you go to the other side, do the same thing, just a little bit. Chip came up. Do you see bent pins? I don't see bent pins. It just works perfectly. Perfectionis. Of course, you'll need a soldering iron. They're also good for impaling your thumb. Yes. The little U-shaped chip pullers of the 1980s are only good for bending pins or getting keycaps off. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, those things are awful. So processing data, where was I? Soldering iron. Get a good soldering iron. And by good, I don't necessarily mean expensive. You don't want to get one of those little soldering pencils that looks like a screwdriver, unless it's the Pinecil. Pinecil. That is the only small stick-shaped one that I would suggest. Because those things have most of those just little cheapies, they have no temperature control. They're on at full blast. Who knows what full blast is? It might be so hot that it'll burn holes right through the board you're trying to work on, or fry the chip you're trying to solder on. So you want to have something that has some sort of semblance of temperature control. I suggest a small soldering station that has a soldering handle. I mean, I have mine here on my bench like this. That on a lead that you can have it separate. That takes T12 soldering tips, because the tips are replaceable. You can just get a new tip. Like this one, you can see that tip is burned out. I'm going to need to get a new one soon. But the entire heating element everything is in the tip. And I'm going to make sure that this is off. I don't want it turning on while I'm trying to yank it out, but I can just pull that right out and put in a completely different soldering tip. While it's on, I can just use a pair of pliers, take that out and just set it aside, and then put a completely new tip while it's running. So say I need to get in and do super, super fine work, I can put a super fine tip in there. Very helpful. It's very helpful to get that tool first, right? And you can get one of those soldering stations for like $60. It's a little bit pricey, but we're not talking like $500 soldering station. You don't need it. I've been using this little $60 soldering station for 4 years. Works great. No complaints. It just functions, right? So awesome sauce. for the most part, for what you're going, a lot of what you're going to be doing for the Apple II, that's all you'll need, with one final exception, and that is going to be a solder sucker. You're going to want something that actually, Jay Graham, Z80 guy, put a great link. I can show that to you. A link to one of these thingamadoodles in the Discord. This is a pin straightener. I can show that here in a second. Not absolutely required, but it reduces a lot of error. When you get chips, when you get the chips, the pins are slightly flayed out. They're not completely straight, and you can't get them into sockets. But if you get one of these little things, you put the chip in there and just go chunk, it makes them perfectly straight, and they go right into sockets without a problem. Super, super awesome tool. But the final thing is going to be a solder sucker. Now, there are many different ways to do solder suckers. I prefer the solder sucker that has the built-in pump, the built-in vacuum pump, because it heats itself up. It's its own soldering iron and its own vacuum. And you just stick it on the joint and pull the trigger, and it just eats the solder. It eats it for breakfast. It goes brain dead because of lead. You know, it just works, right? And that's this guy here. It's one of these. Mine is the Hacko FR301. It's fully self-contained. It keeps the solder in the little thing here. The little end fell off of it. Stand by. So it has filters on it. It comes with all the tools needed to clean the tip out. Comes with a replacement heating element, the whole 9 yards. This thing's great. You stick it on there, you swirl it around the joint and go, here, I'll even turn it on. You pull the trigger and goes, just sucks the joint clean. Great. Awesome sauce. But things can be expensive. I went with the Hacko because I was tired of dealing with solder sucking tools that were crap. And this thing is not. This is like a $300 tool. But you don't have to go super expensive. You can get one of the manual pump solder suckers. Like this. If you do get one, this is the one I suggest, the Engineer SS02. Japanese made, high quality, solid aluminum. And it has a little silicone tip on it. This is high temperature silicone. Now the thing with all these solder suckers, the important thing is that they keep suction, right? I don't know if you can see that. You press the button and it goes whoop, and sucks it out. This one is awesome because of this tip. It will survive the temperature of your solder, but it will completely seal around the joint. So when you pull that, it's going to pull and suck it all out. Great, great tool. But you're going to want some sort of solder sucker like that. Put this back in here. Now, I do not use this often. I keep this more for my mobile kit in case I need to go somewhere for a client and do something. It's rare, but that would be the one I would suggest. I would not suggest getting the silly blue, like the silly anodized blue aluminum one that's got the little plastic, the white plastic tip on it. Those things are crap. They don't suck worth crap, in my opinion. I've had nothing but problems with those things for a billion years. You can also use, somebody just dropped one for a bench belt electric desolder pump for solder removal. I have one of those. I'm not a huge fan of that particular one. Although it is a little bit better than this, because the way these work is you have to put your soldering iron on the tip or on the joint you're trying to desolder, and then very quickly put that, go like that real quick onto the joint and trigger it to get it to suck out. The link that was put in there by Jeff D in the to Jameco, those vacuum desoldering pumps, those will work as well. I'm not a fan of them. I have tried to use them. They don't seem to work very well for me. But then again, I'm a frigging moron, so I may just be doing it wrong. I don't know. But yeah, you'll want some sort of solder removal tool. The reason you need a good solder removal tool is because you got to get the chips out, right? You got to be able to get these chips out. And you got to get the joints clear, because if you don't clear the joint properly, well, first off, you can't get the chip out. I mean, it's soldered in place. But also, if you don't clear the joint well, you can have just enough of a little tag of solder between the pin and the via hole, or what's called the through hole, the hole that goes through the board that the solder connects the pin to. That's your physical electrical connection to those wires baked into that board and that chip, is that little hole. And if you try to use, if you don't clear your pins out correctly, and you try to just start yanking it out with one of these chip lifters, you can literally rip the whole via hole, the whole copper rivet can be pulled straight out, along with the trace on both sides or either side, right? And when you do that, then you get to talk to me in a private chat about how to do trace repair, which is a completely different situation. So you want a really, really good solder sucker. Those are the three, good multimeter, a good soldering iron, a good chip lifter, and a good solder removal tool are your major tools. Having solder wick is helpful as well for clearing via holes or through holes that for some reason have some solder stuck in them, or they have a little tiny like wick or tag of solder on it. You can use the solder wick with a tiny bit of you can use flux, but this has flux on it. You just stick it on there and it sucks it up and it gets rid of the little solder for you. But that's not absolutely necessary. You can usually live without that. Yeah, those are going to be your main tools. Once you start to get beyond just, oh, the chip is hot, I replace chip fix now, then you start to get into needing tools like oscilloscopes. For the work that we do with the Apple IIs, literally any old oscilloscope will work. You used to be able to, until Dave Jones on EEV blog said, here, go to eBay and buy oscilloscopes. You used to be able to get like little like 50 megahertz oscilloscopes, little old cheap Tektronix, Bell and Howells and stuff like that, oscilloscopes on eBay for like $50. And any of those old ancient oscilloscopes from the 60s and 70s will work perfectly fine for what we're doing here. You don't have to go crazy all out. They even have these like new little tiny little digital oscilloscopes that for most of what we're doing are helpful and they can work. I can't suggest them because I haven't used them, but that is an option. If you want a good, what I would call a prosumer oscilloscope to start actually looking at signals and seeing what they're doing, I would suggest the Rigol DS1054Z or Z, mainly because it is the cheapest 4-channel 1 gigahertz scope that exists. It is an actual professional product. It works perfectly fine. And as I said, it has 4 channels. So you can be monitoring one channel and another channel all at the same time to see how signals correlate to each other, which is helpful. But it's inexpensive. It's like and by inexpensive, I mean for a professional scope, it's like a $400 oscilloscope. That's not bad for a 4-channel. That's and then it can be Riglolled. I'll just put RIGLOL. It means you can do magic things to the scope to make it do things it wasn't designed to do. I'll just put that there. I won't discuss that any further. So yeah. Having a logic probe is also helpful as well. A logic probe is kind of like an oscilloscope on aspirin. What a logic probe will do is it'll let you know, it won't tell you, actually show you the signal on a chip, on a pin, but it will, however, let you know what that pin is doing, right? So I have a logic probe. I almost never use it. I almost always just use my oscilloscope because I've been doing this long enough that I know what a lot of signals are supposed to look like. So I prefer to use the scope to see it because hearing it doesn't tell me anything. But what a logic probe does is it makes little beepy noises. And when you connect it up to a pin, you can tell whether the pin is at a high logic level, as at a low logic level, whether it's like 5 volts or 0 volts. It'll tell you if it's all the way up or all the way down. It'll tell you if it's oscillating, and the pitch, the sound, the pitch of the oscillation kind of tells you the frequency at which that oscillation is happening. So if you know something is really supposed to be a really high, that's a technical term. You can quote me on that. But you're getting like a completely different sound. You'll know, well, I know this chip isn't working right. So you can start to trace around and figure that out. But it'll also help you see if a chip is floating, i.e. there's nothing on that pin. You put the logic probe on a pin that you know is supposed to have something on it, and the logic probe doesn't do anything. You know that chip isn't working, right? You can also use logic analyzer. That's helpful more doing reverse engineering. It can be helpful as a diagnostic tool if you're one of those, not to offend anybody who does this, but if you're one of the super pedantic people who will read the data sheet and be like, well, this pen should do the thing, blah, blah, blah. You can use a logic analyzer, connect it to an actual chip, and see what the logic levels are doing in real time. Kind of like an oscilloscope, but with more channels. Rob Haleman, how did you get footage of me reading a data sheet? Ha-ha! Yes. Logic analyzers are start to get into reverse engineering territory for most, if not pretty much all, of the repair work that you're going to do on like an Apple II, an Apple III. You don't need a logic analyzer. You don't need it. A logic probe and some common sense are usually going to help you, especially most of those machines that socketed chips. If you think a chip is bad, just replace the chip. Pull the chip out, put the new chip in. Does it work? Hey, you fixed it. It's not really, it's not bad. Somebody is asking, I got some more questions here. Something about the Rigol somewhere I saw, stand by. Does the Rigol I mentioned have a logic analyzer in it? No. The logic analyzer feature of many oscilloscopes brings the oscilloscope price way up. And personally, I am as cheap as a tacky prom night tuxedo that is like bright blue. I'm cheap as heck. So I don't spend money unless I have to, unless I know like this absolutely needs to happen. So other questions we have. Oh, War Thurton, thank you for posting that. Let's get to that question. That was a good question. So that's the tools I want to use. Let's get to this other question here. I'm pretty sure I burned out the UARTs on my 2C+. What is the best way to diagnose and probably secure replacement? Super good question. So your best way to diagnose that one is going to be your fingies. Stick your finger on the UARTs. Are they super hot? If they're super hot to bad, you're going to want to yank them out and replace them. It wouldn't hurt to yank them out and replace them anyway and see what happens, right? And we'll talk about what the chips are and how to get them. In the Apple IIc Plus, if the memory serves, you got two UART chips. They're the 6551 chips. Those you can still get. They still make them. You can get them from Mouser.com. A Western Design Center, WDC, still makes modern versions of all these old chips. And you can just get them and throw them in your machine for the most part, and they just work. The Apple IIc Plus also has a couple of MC 1488 and 1489 driver chips, because RS-232 is not a 5-volt logic. It's some like 9 to 20 volt logic signal wackiness. And so it requires a couple of little special driver chips. That's what the 1488 and 1489 chips are. So there is a possibility that it may just be your driver chips. So you can also check those. Again, put your fingies on them. Are they hot? If they're super hot, if you put it in, pull the chip out, put a new chip in, right? Another thing you can do, of course, is if you have a logic probe, you can try to use ProTerm or something, I don't care what, hook a modem to the port and try to initiate communications and just put it in some sort of loop. And then you can use your logic probe on the pins of both the 6551 and the 1488 and 1489 to see what it's doing or to hear what it's doing. Are the chips doing anything? Are you getting anything out of them? Right? And if you are, then something else is going on. If you're not, that will help you determine, okay, well, the outputs of the 1488 aren't actually sending data out the port. Well, then, okay, well, there you go. Yep. So that's that. Somebody mentioned that the 6551 had timing issues. The modern 6551 has what's called an interrupt bug, where if you have a program that uses the interrupt mode to tell the computer to go fetch data from the UART's buffer upon receipt of that data, it doesn't set correctly. So it ends up eating data. If you're worried about that, there are still older 6551s you can get on NAS. Jameco, I'm sure, has them. The 6551 was one of those ubiquitous ancient chips that there's still just billions of them laying in warehouses waiting to be found and sold. So that's not a problem. The 1488 and 1489 chips, the serial driver chips, those are still made. You can still buy those new. Brand new, direct, no problem. No issue there. Real logic analyzers are costly. Oh, yeah, you got a HP 1651. Yep. If you want to write with logic protocol functions and you want to mix signal oscilloscope, exactly. So like the 1054 I have is a functional, is effectively, from the hardware perspective, you can even see it if you look, there's a little port on the front where it has the port to stick in the logic probe or the logic analyzer, dongly-do, but there's no header there. And the entire circuit board isn't inside the scope to connect to anyway. But basically the updated version of the Rigol, the MSO 1104, it's the same scope I have. It just has that logic probe stuffed into it. Or logic analyzer. However, cool little trick on logic analyzer stuff. If you're not doing incredibly, how can we put it? If you're not doing incredibly high speed logic analysis, I can show you. Make these little cheap off the shelf USB logic analyzers. These are a good option if you're just getting started and want to learn how to use. You can use this right here. One of these cheap things. These things cost like $9. I actually use these to reverse engineer the keyboard chip in the Apple III. It was very helpful to figure out what certain signals did what. But you can use one of these in combination with a program on your computer in Windows. It's called something pulse view. I have it on my start menu. Stand by. I'm going to find it. I'm going to click it. You got to wait. You got to wait. Pulse view something. I don't remember the name of the company. It's called Pulse View. That you can connect it to as many of those logic analyzers as you want. It'll actually connect to like the Saley, the nice high-end logic analyzers, Handtech logic analyzers, GWN's Tech, DreamSource Labs, a lot of different like USB logic analyzers this program will connect to. So you can just use your PC as the logic analyzer if you want. Works fine. And this tends to be a lot more cost-effective than using a piece of bench equipment. However, the bench equipment, of course, is going to be this high-end professional something or other that's actually like, calibrated and works. So whatever. I'm ranting and going off on a whatever. I'm just reading people having questions and things about stuffs. More Q&A questions. Do I have a logic analyzer? I already answered that. I use those little things. That's what I use. But I don't have to use logic analyzers very often. Usually you can just, if you know what a chip is supposed to do, you just take a real quick look at the data sheet and be like, well, that's an output, that's an input, that's supposed to be 5 volts, that's whatever, blah, blah, blah. You can use an oscilloscope and just kind of probe the pins to figure out what it is. Logic probes or logic analyzers really are better for reverse engineering. Like Petter right now is trying to reverse engineer multiple different smart port thingies. Smart port is the block access protocol effectively on Apple IIs. And you've got like 100 different smart port devices, all that slightly differently implement smart port and different stuff. So having a logic analyzer to figure out how they're actually communicating is very helpful. Thomas Cherry Holmes thinks block and character device. I forgot that. Yes. Yeah, he's Thomas and Jeff are going to be talking about FujiNet tomorrow, and the freaking awesomeness that it can do. Oh, I look forward to that. That is going to be super duper awesome. I got my fun stuff. Let's go back to this Discord. Anyone have a junk 2GS motherboard to see that I need an IWM chip to fix my workhorse 2GS? I may have blown it up last year while fixing 3.5-inch drives for people. Sark mentioned that a couple days ago. Because he connected something wrong to it. Yeah. So 99.9% of the time, it is nearly impossible to actually blow up an IWM chip, unless you're nerds like us who are like, we're doing things that we're not supposed to be doing. Everyday users are not going to blow up an IWM chip. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I've done it. Sark's done it. Some of us crazy people who repair a lot of stuff have done it, but that's usually because of the old off by one thing. So like if you're using, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, if you've blown up your disk 2 drive because you plugged the connector in off by one and you blow up a chip inside the disk 2 called the 74LS125. You can do something similar to the IWM chip accidentally if you plug things in wrong. You can put 12 volts on 5 volts or 12 volts on an input or something like that and blow up the IWM chip. Again, most of you aren't going to have that problem, but the symptom of a blown up IWM chip, if you don't know what the IWM chip is, it's the disk controller chip on the unified systems, the Apple IIc, the Apple IIc Plus, the 2GS, and like a whole bunch of Macs up until like the SE. FEHD. That controller chip it's the entire disk 2 controller, the entire slot 6 controller for the Apple II, and a single little chip, single little tiny chip. It does the whole thing. It's magical. Yeah. Blake Patterson, airplane black boxes are made of a cube constructive of IWM chips. Yes. What he's trying to say there is IWM is like, they're very robust, hard to destroy if you're just normally plugging your stuff in. Like, don't do this, but I've seen machines have disk drives plugged in and pulled out while the drive was on, and the IWM chip's like, it doesn't care. Again, our Apple IIs are normally tanks. It's very hard to break them unless you're trying to do it intentionally. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. That doesn't happen often. It just doesn't. So yeah. Going through Chad Doodles. Sigrock Pulse View. Yes, thank you, Thomas. Link or name of that Japanese. I'm going through the YouTube chat now. Link or name of that Japanese solder sucker. Again, it's called Engineer SS-02. I'll put that in YouTube for Eric. That is that there. So yeah, basically, I have fun. I get to hang out with a whole bunch of cool people. I get to talk to and know a whole bunch of really awesome people. I've gotten to meet a whole bunch of awesome people. I've learned to fix things. And it's all because of these awesome people. Now, I've spent the last 2 hours talking about me, but let's talk about us for a little bit. We'll end your Thursday night with some touchy-feely awesomeness. The Apple II community is one of the most open, welcoming, and friendly communities of hobbyist communities, I'll put it that way, that I've ever seen. For the most part, we all just get along. We love our computers, we love what they can do, and we do everything we can to help each other out. There's usually very little snark. There's usually very little, well, why don't you know that? I won't call out any other communities specifically, but I have run in some of those circles, and the other communities are like that. They're like, well, you did it wrong. Well, how am I supposed to know? I just started using this computer, this XYZ not Apple computer. I'm here to learn. I'm here to get better, to get good, so to speak. The Apple II community will help you get good. We will answer your questions. We will not be judgmental of you. You don't know. We know you don't know, but we do. And we want the Apple II to live forever, hence the phrase Apple II forever. How in the heck are we going to do that unless we work with each other? And that's pretty much what we do. There are always some outliers, of course. That's going to happen in any community. But for the most part, we just get along. I could not be doing what I do right now if it weren't for all of you awesome people. The people who have encouraged me throughout the years, the people who have answered my stupid questions, some of which were like just before this chat, like an hour ago, right? Where would I be if I hadn't learned from Javier how to retrograde? If I hadn't learned from Steve Buggy about how to align disk 2 drives? If I hadn't learned from 4 a.m. and learned from Jason Scott how to properly archive and take care of my stuff and identify what's really important and what's just crap you don't have to worry about, where would I be without that? Where would we be without Carrington Vanston and Quinn Dunkey and their freaking awesome humor? I don't know. Where would we be without Paul Hagstrom, for example, and his excellent podcast? Where would we be without the Apple II and the Apple II KansasFest committee, who for the past 14 quadrillion years has been putting on this wonderful show that we're all here at right now to keep it going, to actually represent Apple II forever? Where will we be? We'd be a whole bunch of nerds living in our mom's basement. This is my basement. This isn't mom's basement. But just mulling about, hoping something good would happen. Right? It's us. We make this happen. And again, while I've been talking about me for 2 hours, me isn't me without you. I can't do me without you. Where would I be without Stavros Karatsiridis, who lives just across the state from me, who can come and hang out with me every once in a while and share old stories and stuff? Where would I be without Britt Dodd, who traded me a couple of Apple IIIs for a couple old Macs that allowed me to learn things? Nowhere. Where would I be without Petter Piskarik, all the way down in Texas? I emailed him source code that he created some breadboard wackiness to emulate my programmer, my chip programmer, so that he could program a chip so he could test that in an Apple III Plus. It would be nowhere. I wouldn't be able to support the Apple III Plus because I wouldn't have people to help me. I'd have to wait to find an Apple III Plus so I could test it. No, because you're all there. I can lean on you guys. I'd be like, hey, I got a question. Hey, have you seen this? Hey, does somebody out there have this thing? Hey, I need to find this. I need to find XYZ. Hey, doesn't anybody know what that chip is in that machine? Hey, have you been to Sean Fahey's place and seen the awesome Apple II fiber optic card? Wasn't that crazy? That's what it is. That's what it is. Right? It's us. KansasFest is made of people. The Apple II is forever, but the people are what make it alive. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, technically I have 20 more minutes. I don't have anything else to talk about. I don't have really a lot of time to get dug into anything super technical. Like I said, I do have this Macintosh SC board to work on, but that's like not Apple II stuff. So yeah, any other further questions, thoughts, comments, rants, raves? Anybody have anything they want to ask? Ask me before I leave. Sing Apple II forever. Blake, no. The answer to that question is no. No. Sean's collection would be a pilgrimage for me. Yes, Sean's collection, for those of you who don't know who Sean Fahey is, if you're new to Kansas Fest, Sean Fahey is local-ish to Rockhurst. He's like a half hour, an hour away. He was the instigator of the garage giveaway that you all wonderfully partook of, those who are in person anyway, yesterday. Because he has probably one of the largest, I don't know if it is the largest, but it is one of the largest Apple II related collections probably in the world. That's not in an actual museum. He has, like I said, like crazy rare things that there are probably like 4 of in existence, and he's got 3 of them because he's been around so much. I had the opportunity in 2019 at my first Kansas Fest to go there because I just happened to, like, I don't want to say I happen to know the right people, because that sounds like, I don't know how you want to put it. That sounds like elitist or something like that. But I had known Javier for a while, and Javier knew Sean, and I got invited to go. I think somebody else was involved in that too. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it was like, hey, let's go over there. It's like an hour away. Let's run down there real quick. And Sean let me in, and we just, fiber optic transceiver card for Apple II that goes in Apple II slot. What is that? What was it for? It doesn't have an Apple II part number or an Apple part number on it, but it's the Apple logo on it. It's an official Apple product. It is not documented anywhere. What was it used for? Missile silos? The US government? CIA? Who knows? Nobody knows. But that's cool stuff. And where would we be without that? We wouldn't know about it. We wouldn't know about it. So, yes. So, if any of you are in person at KFest this year, and you have the opportunity ever, if Sean is giving tours, take that tour. Your mind will be blown. Petter is asking me to sing the song Up. I'm not going to sing it. Long story short, I've been planning for the past 7 or 8 years, since before Kansas Fest, to make a nerd-themed version of Jump by Van Halen. And I got extra motivated after Eddie Van Halen passed away last year to make that. Basically, Van Halen's my favorite band. Jump is my favorite song. It's from 1984. It's from when I was a kid. It is one of the first guitar solos I remember. To this day, when I hear the guitar solo in Jump, I think about when I was a little kid. That's the first memory I remember. And I've created a version of that song. It's not done yet. And I've asked a lot of fans in the community to scream the word jump and send me a voicemail of it, or send it to me, because I want to use y'all as background audio. So if y'all want to do that, go to my website, jcm-1.com, and get in contact with me. If you want to send me yourself yelling up, not jump, up. Remember, it's going to be a parody. And I'll put y'all in as background vocalists. So yeah. I need to work on Jump on guitar again. Yes, it's the only keyboard song I know how to play. I can play Jump on a keyboard. I can't do the solo, but I can do the da 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 da. I can put that. I can do that. But yeah. Q&A. Set slot 2 to my card. To my card. Did not see a CFFA 3000 slot 2. Shall I try it in my other 5 2GSs? Yeah, Patrick, go ahead and try it as many 2GSs as you want. Also remember, as a matter of fact, here is a very special thing you might have to do. The compact flash for Apple II card. Here, I'm going to take it out here. The compact flash for Apple II card has this dip switches. That second one over that's flipped differently from the LED, that second one in needs to be flipped down in order for that to work in the 2GS. Don't forget that either. Very important. Also, just remove try your CFFA 3000 in there by itself. Try it in there by itself. Remove all of the other cards from the machine and just try it with the CFFA 3000. That's your final diagnostic thing of the day. Remember, in an Apple II, Apple IIe, Apple II GS, Apple II Plus, if your machine is working weird, remove all the cards. That's the one first thing you learn, like on a PC. Did you reboot it? Or on a Mac, did you clear the desktop, or did you rebuild the desktop file? On the Apple II, diagnostic number 1, did you take all the cards out? Test the card by itself. Yep. Cool. Well, I'm supposed to go to 10:30. I'm just sitting here chatting now. I've said all I gotta say.
Yeah. I think you've done enough, and you deserve a break for the night.
TV show or YouTube episode came out. I really want to watch it. I don't remember which one it was.
Yes, go.
But I do want to go. I do want to go. I do want to sell now.
Let's all give Joe a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much, Joe, for contributing. And speaking of which, everything that you do for the community as well. You thanked a lot of people, but we really appreciate everything that you do. Not only just your videos, but just your enthusiasm, your vibrant personality, the hat that you put on every now and then, and it's
hat time. Yeehaw! Yep. Lasso that like button, partners. Yes.
You're an inspiration, and I mean that seriously. I think that all of us who contribute in different ways, and we see your enthusiasm, and it's definitely infectious. So for those of you online, we're going to be shutting down for the night. We will resume tomorrow morning, so that's Friday. The first talk is at 9:15, and that's going to be on Vector Games and Apple Logo, and that's Melody and April Ayers Griffiths.
They know their stuff. You're in for a treat tomorrow, guys. Guaranteed.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for everything. Paul, do you have anything else that you need to say or do, or?
I don't think so, but the talk was great. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thanks for letting me chat and yell at people on the internet for 2 hours like a crazy person. It's been fun. And remember, everybody, Apple II forever.
Great. Good night, everybody.